Well, I'm in North Somerset today, and the town I'm visiting was a very important chapter in my life in the early 1980s. Welcome to Portishead. Portishead is a coastal town on the Severn Estuary, close to Bristol, but within the unitary authority of North Somerset, which falls within the ceremonial county of Somerset. The name Portishead originates from the port at the head of the river. The Victorian High Street has retained a number of local shops, such as Morgan Westley, The Outlet, Carey's DIY and Zebra, despite some larger supermarket chains being built, like Sainsbury's, Lidl, Homebase and Waitrose. Portishead has a long history as a fishing port. As a royal manor, it expanded rapidly during the early 19th century around the docks, with supporting transport infrastructure. A power station and chemical works were added in the 20th century, but the dock and industrial facilities have since closed and been redeveloped into a marina and residential areas. Portishead was also the telephone control centre used by British Telecom for non-direct dialed calls to maritime vessels, a service known as Portishead Radio. I made my way to the seafront, where I came to the lake grounds. Built around a 100-year-old artificial lake and running alongside the esplanade, this is the town's main recreation ground and conservation area. As well as the lake, there is a children's playground, tennis courts and bowls, and during the summer, rowing boats are available for hire. This is also a popular place for model boat enthusiasts, who can often be seen sailing remote-controlled boats across the lake. I lived here in Portishead for about 3.5 years. We moved here in early 1981 and left in late 1984. And being in Portishead was a very transitional period in my life, because I spent the last 3 years of my childhood here and the very first few months of being an adult. I had been growing up in South Wales, where I spent most of my childhood. But when I was about 14, Mum was working for a company who were moving premises, and they were moving their premises here to Portishead. And they wanted Mum to move with them, so they offered to pay for her to move with the job. So that's what we did. So in early 1981, just before my 15th birthday, we came here and we moved to a house just up on the hill behind me, which had great views over Portishead and the Bristol Channel. One of the UK's few surviving outdoor swimming pools is situated on the shore next to the lake grounds and is open during the summer months. In 2009, the outdoor pool was renovated by a team filming for the American TV programme Ty's Great British Adventure. Beside the swimming pool, I climbed some steps onto Portishead Point, more commonly known as Battery Point. The lighthouse was built in 1931 by the Chance brothers of Smethwick. The 30-foot high structure consists of a black metal pyramid on a concrete base. A 2-ton fog bell, which used to hang on the structure, was removed in 1998. Following public campaigning for restoration, the bell was acquired by Portishead Town Council and returned to the town in 2012. The lighthouse is currently maintained by the Bristol Ports Company. From here, I had some great views of nearby Avonmouth and Portbury docks, as well as the second Severn crossing. I walked along the esplanade, and just beyond the lake grounds I came to the start of the coast path, which I decided to follow. This was a path I often walked along when I lived in Portishead, so it was nice to return today to enjoy this route again. Now, throughout my life, most people have called me either Patrick or Pat, but when I moved to Portishead, I got stuck with a nickname. Just after we moved here, one of my new friends I made here started calling me Paddy, and that stuck. It just spread. So, a lot of people still call me Patrick or Pat, but about a third of the people I knew in Portishead called me Paddy. I got used to it, but I never really cared for it, if I'm honest, but I just accepted it because that was what I was called. But in more recent years, before I deleted my recent Facebook account, one of my friends that I was in touch with in Portishead still referred to me as Paddy in one of their messages, and I actually cringed when I read that, and I realised that I didn't actually like it at all now. I actually hated being called Paddy now. In hindsight, I actually wish I'd told her that. There you go. So, I like being called Patrick or Pat, but not Paddy. As I carried on along the coast path, I eventually came to Black Nore Point, with its lighthouse, a Grade II listed building built in 1894. The metal white-painted lighthouse was built by Trinity House to guide shipping in the Severn Estuary as it made its way in and out of Bristol Harbour. In October 2011, after it was no longer needed for navigational purposes, it was sold to a trust for preservation at a cost of £1. Just behind the lighthouse is the impressive National Nautical School. The red brick building was constructed by Edward Gabriel in 1905 at a cost of £30,000. Previously it had been based on the training ship HMS Formidable and operated until 1983. It is now part of a private gated community known as Fedden Village. Walking onto Nore Road, I made my way inland for a while, as I decided to visit a place which played an important part of my childhood when I first moved to Portishead, my old school. And that was my school, Gordano School. I was only here for a year and a bit because I'd spent all of my school days in South Wales, and I'd spent the majority of my fourth year over there before we moved to Portishead and spent the remainder of the fourth year here, and then all of my fifth year before I left school completely. Now, I do remember one thing going from one school to another. Gordano School seemed a lot less strict than my previous school. There was still discipline there, but teachers at the last school all wore black gowns and they called you by your surname. Whereas here, they called you by your Christian name, and it seemed a little more friendly, a little less sort of intense. And although you had to wear a school uniform, it wasn't compulsory to wear a blazer and the tie. As long as you wore the school colours, which was the shirt, the jumper and the trousers, you didn't have to wear the tie and the blazer, which was really nice. But it didn't actually make me like school anymore. I absolutely hated school all the time I was here. Absolutely hated it. So when I left in 1982, it was like being released from prison. Living in Portishead also marked a major development in my musical skills. I had always been musical from a very young age and played around on an electric musical keyboard for many years. After I reached the age of 13, my mum bought me a proper electronic organ, as she decided she wanted me to learn to play properly. By the time we moved to Portishead, I had been learning properly for just over a year, and my new teacher, John Merchant, was a professional organist, who had his own show at that time on the local BBC Radio Bristol. John was a fantastic teacher, and because of him, my organ playing skills practically improved overnight. I even featured in one of his radio shows, for which I was extremely flattered and grateful. I owe a great deal to John Merchant for the musical talent I still have today. Well, now I decided to look at a part of Portishead that has changed completely since I lived here. This is the marina, previously a deep water dock with industrial facilities, all now redeveloped to provide a wide range of housing as well as waterside bars and restaurants. This part of Portishead is completely new to me. When I lived here, this marina used to be a run-down dockland, but they've developed it beautifully, and it looks fantastic now. I don't recognise it. I would never have found my way around here, and it's like a completely new town in itself. And also when I lived here, there used to be an old disused power station here, and the year we moved here, I was actually witness to the demolition of 2 of the chimneys, and I've actually got a couple of pictures when one of the chimneys was demolished. Heading back to the seafront, I came to Redcliffe Bay, a large residential area of Portishead, with most houses having views over the Severn Estuary. So after I left Gordano School in 1982, I was out of work for a few months, but then I started my very first job later on in 1982 at the tender age of 16. I did a couple of schemes where I learned skills such as building maintenance, woodwork, and also went on work placements. I had experience of working in a card shop, a t-shirt transfer printing factory, and some clerical work in a local wine merchant. I then started my first permanent job when I joined Avon County Council in February 1984. Walking on from Redcliffe Bay marked the end of my day here. But before leaving, I went back to the lake grounds for one final thought of when I was once a resident of Portishead. I remember enjoying living in Portishead, and even though it's been 33 years since I moved away from here, I still like the place. There's a lot of changes to it. You know, you've got the new marina and there's a lot of new shops, and the road system's changed around the outskirts, but it's still very much as I remember it apart from that. It's still a nice place. It's been nice coming back.